cards stacked from top to bottom. I cannot wait.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome to HealthLink, a program connecting home, community, and healthcare. My name is Carol Merton, and today I'm delighted to welcome as a guest Jill Umbach. Now, Jill's official title, and you'll have to correct me, Jill, if it's changed, but is Planning Network Coordinator, Bruce Gray Poverty Task Force, which is part of the United Way of Bruce and Gray. Do I have that right?
That is correct. It's actually supported by Gray County, Bruce County, and the United Way, but I do sit in the United Way office.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. So welcome today.
Thank you.
We're going to be chatting about a couple of very interesting things going on. You always have lots to share. But specifically today, we're going to talk about the Basic Income Campaign. And within the last 24 hours of the taping of this program, the Vital Signs report from the Community Foundation, Gray Bruce, has come out regarding housing. So I'd be most interested in information you can share about that. So tell me a little bit about the Basic Income Campaign. When I pulled out some of the information from Bruce Gray Poverty Task Force, there's a triangle there about income solutions and economic prosperity. I did some homework, Jill. and I need to understand the difference between a basic income guarantee and a living wage.
Okay. So many of us know that a basic income or a guaranteed income is something that we actually already have in place for targeted vulnerable populations. So for example, if you're a senior and you're living below the poverty line after, say after retirement, you will receive a guaranteed income supplement. So that is in place right now. GIS is what it's casually called, the acronym. So many seniors will be familiar with that extra little bit per month that helps you get by. And that's when you drop below a certain threshold, then you get a supplement. And that is in place right now with the federal government.
Okay.
In addition, we have the child tax benefit. So the old mother's allowance. That is a guaranteed income supplement for families with children. Okay. And that is to cover your costs of living. We know it's always not enough, but it's certainly things that we have had in place for a very long time as part of the safety net for low-income families. And we know that the impact of both of those supplementary programs has been more people are above the poverty line than would be otherwise. Yeah. So what happens is when we consider people that are in the working age category, right? People that should be able to go out there, get a job, make enough money, pay for their housing, whether it's purchasing a house or simply paying rent, covering all those things for your family. And that is something that we're having a challenge with because we know right now people are not making enough money to cover the cost of living. Everything's going up price-wise. And so what we're looking at right now is we have a lot of Band-Aid solutions. So we know that especially under the pandemic, we have agencies that will give you food from the food bank, from the community meal programs. We have a range of other great charities that are helping people to stay afloat. You're not getting ahead, you're not building a boat, but you're staying afloat, right? Yeah. What we're looking at is the money that the government has invested in response to so many people in need. We are talking right now about what happens when you actually put the money up front first. and you support people at the get-go. We saw with the CERB, which is a type of guaranteed basic income, the calculation for that CERB was much higher than Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Program, which is the social assistance for people who are either unable to work or temporarily in circumstances where they are not making enough income to pay and cover their rent and everything else. So we know various parts of this. We also know that paying people initially a basic income also allows them to make choices that are different than if you're on the other end. So, you know, when charities reach out and support, we're not giving a lot of choice to people, right? You're going to be grateful for what you receive.
Yeah.
And that's not a very dignified way sometimes for people to make choices. We know that it's much better if you have your own salary. I think every teenager knows what it's like to have your own money and not have it managed by your parents. In the same way, we are looking at people with income coming into them that is sufficient to be able to secure a good rent, to be able to make some decisions maybe about going back to school, taking more opportunities. We know that a lot of the scenarios are not the same. You may have temporarily lost a job, and so you have, you know, things that weren't planned for, unexpected losses of income, you know, can really impact even in the best circumstances, no matter where you are, you know, whether you've got middle class income or whether you're lower, you know, depending on where you're at, the impact of a loss of income can be greater or it can be smaller if you've got a reserve of funds. So we know that the lower an income you have, the fewer resources you're going to have, and then it's harder to make plans. It's harder to come back from a setback. And it's harder to manage transitions if you're having to spend your time running around and accessing resources. So if we were to look at a basic income or guaranteed income, it would mean that you would get assessed with your taxes. And the same way the GIS or the child tax benefit operates, you would get that supplement. It would come directly into your account. There wouldn't be anybody, judge and jury, monitoring to see if you're deserving. It would be an income solution. It would not be a charitable application. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a basic income guaranteed. When we talk about a living wage, this is a calculation that is different than the minimum wage. So the government regulates minimum wage for various sectors as well as age categories. A living wage is calculated, and it's usually done by organizations that are certified by Living Wage Ontario. In our case, for our area, it's the United Way that does the calculation, the United Way of Bruce Gray. And it takes into consideration all of the costs, housing, a vehicle, because we need transportation. In the cities, you know, the transportation is 2 bus passes versus what we have to do with a car and maintenance and gas prices. So it really is tied to the cost of living. And then it's very specific to the area that you live in terms of what the rent prices are, what the housing is. And so it comes up with a living wage, which means what is it that you need to live on to have a decent life? In our area right now, the living wage is anywhere between $20 and $22 an hour, which is significantly higher than what the minimum wage is. At $15.25, it'll only go up. And the living wage is tied to the cost of living.
So how often would that living wage be adjusted? I mean, that's quite a discrepancy.
It is, yeah. Because the living wage also includes some of the costs that it might be to, say, have a Y membership so your kids can take swimming lessons. So part of that cost also involves the basics, but then a little bit more for being able to be involved, to be included in our community. So I think it has a basic Y membership in there, or it has one local trip holiday included, not extravagant, very, very basic. But yeah, there is a big discrepancy, and it's calculated every year. So
Okay.
it's not something that's static and stays there. It will be, you will see Simcoe Muskoka release it, the City of Toronto or the City of London, and you will see differences between the area based on what their calculations are.
So when you were chatting earlier, certainly about the basic income guarantee, in the document I'm referencing, you say we need income solutions to overcome setbacks, stay well, manage transitions, and create opportunities. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about the staying well? Because we're focused on health and well-being of our communities. Yeah. We're all individuals in the community. Yeah. So what does it mean, the staying well and the income solutions?
Well, we know that poverty is one of the single largest determinants of health. So we know that if you don't have enough money to buy food, healthy food, it will impact on your health. If you don't have a job that provides benefits, then the challenges for purchasing medication, for accessing regularly going to a doctor, the transportation costs might not be there. You might not have the funds to drive. In our area, quite often you are going to London, or you're going, if you get involved with a very serious health issue, then your insurance won't cover everything. Dental care is a big one. Oral health is significant and is tied to your heart health, and it impacts on you. If you're dealing with chronic pain and you don't have the money to deal with medication, or with dental surgery, it's extremely difficult. I know personally I had to pay for my daughter's root canal, and my insurance, I have full insurance, but it only paid a small portion of that. Mm-hmm. Somebody who has no income and can barely pay for their rent isn't going to spend money on dental care. And we know how critical. People will resist going into hospitals if they know there will be bills that need to come out of that, right? They'll leave, but they won't go to the pharmacy. We also know that, a lot of the people experiencing food insecurity, it's not about getting more food sometimes. Yes, there is a physical need, but it's also, we know that only 1 in 5 Grey Bruce households that are food insecure, we know that less than 20% of them will actually go to a food bank. So there's a dignity aspect to this as well. We know people avoid situations because they don't have enough money, so they don't even go. Why bother making that appointment? Because I know he's going to give me a prescription. I don't have coverage for this or that. So it has a huge impact on your health. Mental health. We have wait lists right now for people to get into treatment. We have wait lists for people to get into addictions treatment. And so it's very challenging. If you don't have the money to pay for private services to speed up that access, then you have to get into, scenarios. People also have had, bad experiences at the hospitals, like they're reluctant to go. So we do see a lot of that. I would say, though, more than anything, we still have a shortage of doctors. We still have people that are street involved that just will they will avoid anything in the formal medical scenario. So that's one of the reasons why the SOS mobile pilot that's underway in Grey County is so critical, because they are meeting people where they are at. They are going to the people. So that's a real change from trying to convince somebody who's perhaps got an addiction or a mental health experiences, how to get them to hospital, how to get them treatment. There's a real gap in doing so. And there's a bit of a revolving door in that you can go in, and if you don't have follow-up support outside, then you might not be following whatever the ER doctor told you to. And then you're just using that as a bit of a revolving door. So there is a challenge for doctors that will work with street involved people and to work with our homeless population.
I have a question, but first I want to read, because we are in an election year. Mm-hmm. Not to put you on a hot spot, but I'm just reading from the document. It says we can pay for a guaranteed income for all. It is a matter of political will. So how do we influence the decision makers who will make the funds available and release those funds? What needs to happen?
Okay, so there's two different layers to that. In the Ontario election, what is really coming to the forefront is that we did have previously, under the Liberal government, there was an Ontario basic income pilot started. It was to be a 3-year pilot to test it. Does it work? Should we be investing? How do we shift? And it was really looking at a time when we were also looking at a social transformation of the way we do social assistance. Then at the same time, not the same time, when the Conservatives came in, they canceled it. So we were 1 year into the pilot. So the information that we have is from 1 year into a pilot. And at that point in time, we did see and were able to record the impact in 1 year on the participants. Wow. So in particular, the Hamilton Poverty Reduction Roundtable had a basic income supports where they really worked with a lot of local people to get them signed up for the pilot. And to support them while in the pilot. And they were able to take the stories and the lessons learned from it. And they were able to show that even within 1 year, many people made new investments in their lives. They were able to move to a better standard of housing. They were able to eat a better quality of food. And in many cases, they were able to either invest in a vehicle for a better job, but they also, a lot of them took opportunities to go back to school, and they felt confident they could pay their school loans. So it was just that sense of movement and opportunity. So there is, that was the political will at the time, was we'll have this pilot, we'll evaluate it, and then once the pilot is done, we can say, yay, what's it going to take? That was stopped. And now what we've got is at the federal level, the NDP party has put a private member's bill forward to look at a framework for it federally and nationally. The parliamentary budget officer in 2022 this year was able to estimate what it would cost. So the gross cost of it would be like 81 billion. But they also examined the existing cost of social services. So the response afterwards and how much it's actually costing. So they were saying there's about 30 billion of federal and provincial tax credits could be replaced and deducted from this gross cost. So they're estimating it to be about 51 billion. But one of the big things is that the last price that quote I got was around 2008, that it cost in 2008, quite a few years back, 73 to 86 billion years to respond to people in poverty. So that's with our healthcare, our justice, and our social services systems as they exist back in 2008. So that was the estimate back then. We can only imagine that it's increased. So we're actually spending a lot of money right now to provide social services to people. It won't completely go away. There will still be people that always do need that wraparound support services, but there are ways to redistribute it. The one thing as well that has been calculated is the lost productivity too. And so there's a lot of people that are out of the market. Both the job market for a variety of reasons. And that goes back to the living wage. Some of those reasons are the jobs that are available are precarious jobs, which means that they either don't pay enough, don't have enough benefits, or they are something where, for example, if I wanted to live and work in Thornbury, the housing costs are so high. But there's lots of jobs in Blue Mountains. But again, the housing cost for that area is so high, I can't afford to live and work in the same place, which means I need to have a vehicle. And it's all compounded. Yeah. Whereas if I were to look at a guaranteed income, I would know what I wouldn't be falling back too low. It would give me that space and opportunity to either go back to school for a better job, or it might allow me to spend a little bit more money on gas in a car to get to work.
What really amazes me is even though the pilot was to have been for 3 years, results were evident within year one. Mm-hmm. That's a very impressive turnaround. and an opportunity. So if the investment was made in this, it would be anticipated the reward, the results, the response would be quite quick. And that's not often what can happen when you make a change in programs. So that's quite remarkable.
The other aspect to that was, a lot of people make the assumption, well, those people will just sit at home and do nothing. And in fact, that's not what was happening with the majority of people in the study. They weren't just sitting home. They were taking advantage of finding better opportunities for their family, whether it be living conditions or whether it would be schooling, or even feeling safe enough to switch jobs to something that was a better job for their family.
So that's really a myth. What you've described is a street myth, really. And for sure, people will say, well, why would we pay them to stay home? And what you're saying is the study has shown that's not the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that, one of the biggest challenges we have right now with the current operating system is there isn't enough time to do the support and the wraparound support that is needed for those people that need that extra help.
Right.
And I think that a basic guaranteed income would further separate the ones that just need some more income to get going, and those that would identify, no, I really need more social services support. And so part of the social services, human services transformation is to move back to doing more social work and less paperwork.
Yes, which benefits those who need it the most. So the question I had is around the Indigenous people, because one of the pages says poverty is not neutral. And I'm wondering if you can discuss how the impact is and whether there's a disproportion in how poverty affects our Indigenous communities.
Sure. Our group, we have a basic income working group within the Poverty Task Force, felt it was important that as non-Indigenous people, it was important for non-Indigenous people to take responsibility, right? And just say it, that the impact of poverty on people, Indigenous people, it was a direct result of both the colonial laws as well as federal laws. So that is not an individual choice. It's not a community choice. It's something the government chose to do. And we did it for a variety of reasons, both economic and cultural and everything. But what it did do is it stripped people of both their traditional lands, language, livelihoods, their culture. And in many cases with the residential schools, we took away children. And children were cut off with that, and children died. 40% of Indigenous children live in poverty. So we do have a disproportionate number of people, children and people. 25% of Indigenous people in Canada live in poverty. It is higher than non-Indigenous people. And we know the impact of the residential schools. We know the interruption, the generational trauma. So there's a lot more involved with that in terms of what has to be unpacked. But we wanted to make a strong statement in saying poverty is not neutral.
Yes.
It is very political in the case of Indigenous people.
And that's a very important statement. Before we go into the housing, it also says that Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than any other women in Canada. And that's an important statement, I think, for sure. So we've got about a little less than 5 minutes in the program. And the Vital Focus report on housing, and I'm just going to hold it up here, was released within 24 hours. There's so much in this, Jill, but maybe you can explain your takeaway from it and what you'd like us to really focus on in the next while.
So what we've done with this report, and it really is, I know that the Community Foundation and Vital Signs, and thanks to the sponsor for this report, it started with a conversation, an online public conversation with many partners who were speaking to it. Rent Safe pilot spoke a lot. The county spoke in terms of the county's housing and homelessness strategies. Deanne spoke from Giway. So we had a lot of conversations, really talking about what is affordable housing, what is attainable housing, all of the dynamics. An incredible team pulled together data from various sources, and this is local data, and it's so important that we talk about the local context, and even then talk about the differences between housing in Tobermory, housing in Saugeen Shores, housing in Meaford. We know that even within Grey Bruce, we have differences in our municipalities. So this report looks at the data, listens to the conversations, and then also our keynote speakers are all tied to very important programming that is happening for a while. But a lot of it has come and gelled under the pandemic as well, because we've had so much more of the emergency programming happening. So that's all collectively brought into a 27-page document. It's pretty intense. In some cases, you get a couple of lines for a massive program, and in other cases, we've teased out and highlighted larger stories. And behind every story, there's data. And behind that data is a lot of communities talking about the need for more affordable housing, the need for more affordable rental housing, and then what are the living standards that we want to have for our community.
I think the recognition for me as I look through this is that we have a lot of work to do over the next few years to be able to assist our communities in having housing that is housing security and a house for all. How will you be involved in the future, Jill, with this?
I sit on the Vital Signs Advisory Committee. So just in terms of where we're going with Vital Focus and Vital Signs, we'll continue to use this platform to get to speak to the larger community. And I think what we're really trying to do is to promote a yes in my backyard attitude, right? So not, we don't want people saying, yeah, that's all great as long as you do it over there. Or, it's really good for Owen Sound, but we don't want to have it in Saugeen Shores because we function differently. So what we'd like to do is to see a lot of the work that's been done, the conversations, the recommendations, to spark innovation, to spark new ideas. It's important that we have people with lived experience talking about the reality of what it's like to rent in this current market, housing market, because it's brutal. We have big issues around homelessness and housing. Where are we going to put people? We simply have no place. So we have to come up with alternatives. We have to come up with more engagement and understanding around what is the housing crisis that we have in Grey Bruce right now.
So absolutely, we need more conversation. And Jill, I look forward to having you on the program to help us as we move through this. I really appreciate the time with you today. It always goes so fast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Carol.
Thank you to our viewing audience for joining us today to learn more about resources, services, and programs that are available to you and to your family. Take care and stay safe. Thank you.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.